All right, we are going to talk about the Flash guessing game. So we'll take a quick look at the layers that I've used and my splash screen, and then we'll go into how I coded it and what goes into this. So first of all, you will notice that I have 4 layers. I have actions, text, other, which is something you're going to want that I didn't do. And if you look at the handout, you'll find out you're going to need more decorations than I've got. And then I have obviously a button layer. All right, so on my flat splash screen, it welcomes you. It tells you what's going to happen. Then it's going to tell you after you make a guess, were you correct, too high, or too low. And it says, I will reward you for a correct answer. And when you push the go, you go on to the next frame. Now, if you look up here, you'll notice that in my usual way, I left blank frames. You'll notice that frame 2 contains everything that frame 1 does, but what happens is if I decide I need to, it becomes much easier to insert blank frames if I want to do something. So in my action script, we're going to stop. I'll get to this in a minute. But what I do is I go on to frame 3, and frame 3, if I can get there, says, what is your guess? I would put in more text. You'll notice I have a place for the user to enter their guess, and I have 2 dynamic text boxes. This one, the larger one, is the one that's going to display were you right, were you too high, were you too low. This one we'll get into when we talk about whether, how many guesses they've made or something of that nature. All right, so now what happens in the action script for this frame? Well, I have a computer number. Actually, this should be, this is the action, that's the action script for frame 1, I'm sorry. In frame 3, hopefully, action frame 3, there we go. On the wrong button here. All right, so I have, as usual, a stop. And for testing purposes, I've added something called trace. And when I run this, what's going to happen is it will display there is an output screen, and the output screen will display the computer's number. That is the number that the computer guesses. The comment here says remove after testing. And you can either remove it by commenting it out or just take it out completely. But it's there so that you know what the answer should be, so you can test high numbers, low numbers, and then the correct answer. Okay, so what you may want to do is not have this in yet, but have, if we do this, copy, paste, okay, while you're testing, you should have something like that in, and that way you don't have to go through the celebration part, which is what happens when you go to 5. So if they guess the number, that is, if number guess text.text equals computer number, then they're correct. If that number is too small or too low, you tell them they're too low. And since you can either be high, low, or equal, or the same as, you then say the default is going to be you're too high. So notice that the only place I have a go to is inside the winning answer, or the winning if portion of this, and that will then send them off to the celebration. and that's in 5. And so if we run this, I just simply have that go back and forth, and it stops here, and it says if you would like to play again, press go. And notice that he says that's in frame 80. It's stop and then go to and stop 1. So there's not really that much to this. What you're going to want to do is have the celebration part that you need to improve on. This piece is in so that in another piece, when I show you how, we can decide you get a certain number of guesses, and if you try and make more than that, it'll send you and say, I'm sorry, you didn't guess the number in the appropriate number of guesses. In this case, 5, which is kind of a low number. And then you can press and go back to frame 1, and in frame 1, we start all over again. All right, so that's the basic setup of the game. Let's now look more closely at the action script. All right, we talked about, or at least in the handout, I talked about all of this code, but let's go over it again. All right, var says I am going to declare a variable. I'm going to call it cn, and it is going to be a number. And I'm going to do math.floor, or let's start on the inside. I'm going to do math.random times 100, and that says I'm going to get a number between 0 and 99.99999, and it's going to be decimal. Math floor says take the lowest value, so this would be between 0 and 99. So I add 1, and I get a number between 1 and 100. So by the time everything is said and done, Cn will be a number between 1 and 100, inclusive. And now I take Cn and I put it into computer number, and I call that global so that I can use it anywhere in the program. I set this in the first frame so that if for some reason you decided to go back and forth between frames as we're playing the game, you're not going to get a new number each time. But when we go back to frame 1, after you either win or lose and you decide to play again, you will get a brand new number. All right, now in number 3, we're going to stop. Here is our trace. And now this is the important part. If, else is pretty much what it says. You're going to say, if this happens, if the number that was in the guess text box is the same as the computer's number, they're going to be correct, and you're actually going to send them off to frame 5. If you think about it for a second, anything that goes into the text box when I go to and play 5, you're never going to see it. So that when you start this out, I would do something like that so that you've taken the celebration out so you don't have to worry about it. You just see did you get it correct or not. All right, else if, so that if this is not true, then I'm going to say number guest.text guest underscore txt.text is less than the computer number. It's going to tell me I was too low, else it's going to tell me it's too high. Either of the statements inside the parentheses here, in other words, the equal or the less than, these are referred to as Boolean. They are either true or false. You can't be somewhat true or somewhat false. It's 100% true or false. And if it's true, it executes what's inside the parentheses or inside the braces. If it's not, it skips this and goes to the next one. If this is true, this happens. And if this is false, then the only thing left to do is this. So this says, if this is true, do it. Else, if this is true, do it. Else, whatever, if everything else has failed, do this. Okay. And then finally, we have the go to 5, which was our celebration. And somewhere out here, we have a go to and stop 1, and it starts all over again. So that's really all there is to it. So let's run this once just for fun. And so I push go. And you'll notice in my output screen, I now know the answer is 19. So I can put in 18, and it says you're too low. I can put in 20, and it says you're too high. And if I put in 19, it says I'm correct. And if I had, he says, there we go. If I take this out, let's do this one more time, and I'll just go to the correct answer. So if I do 71, then we get our little cheesy celebration. And you need to make that significantly better. And then we go back to the beginning and we have that. Okay? So once I have finished and I know all of my action script works, then he said, going over here, I will comment this out, save it, and when I run it, I don't get the answer because you don't want the user to know the answer. So this will help you in debugging your program if you have problems. Okay, so the main thing for you to do is to make sure you have all of your layers set up correctly. Have some kind of fun celebration, much more exciting than I had. And then remember that at the end you give them a chance to play again. And in another piece I will explain how you do the limiting to 5 or whatever number you decide guesses.